so you've got your fun Halloween cookie kit. Now, what do you do with it? So, for a few things that you're going to need when you get started with decorating your cookies, you're going to need obviously your icing. You'll need some scissors to cut the tips, a wet paper towel to keep your tips nice and clean, and a couple of toothpicks. This helps to spread the icing out and keep it nice and even. So the first thing that you're going to want to do, and this is extremely important, is to take a look at your icing bags. And if you will notice, this bag is two different colors. And that is because this icing has separated and the water is separating from the icing. So you want to knead this bag until it is all one color again. If you go to try to decorate your cookie with the icing bag like this, it is going to run all over your cookie and it's not going to look nice. So make sure that you knead your cookie bags very, very well. You can see this just naturally happens. So you want to knead them really, really well before you get started. When you are ready, when your bag is nice and kneaded and everything is back to one single color and you don't notice any more separation, then you are going to want to cut the tip on your bag. Now, the rule of thumb with this is that you want to start small. You can always cut a bigger hole, but you cannot put more of the bag back on after you've cut it too much. So we want to cut just the very, very, very tip, just to get, let me see if I can show you. Can you see it? Okay. So just the tip, barely. See, it still looks like the tip is still there. So now you can take your paper towel, you might go through a couple of these, and you can test your, there we go. So that's plenty big enough to decorate your cookies. So a couple of more tips that I can give you before we actually start looking at the cookies. When you are holding your piping bag, a lot of people will take and just grab the middle and start squeezing. And what happens is you get a lot of movement going on here. So it will actually change the pressure when you're actually squeezing it out, and it'll change the thickness of your line and how much comes out every time. So the way that you want to do this is you want to take the bag like this, put your hand up here, put it between your thumb and your forefinger, and wrap your hand around like this to where you're pushing all from the back. It's kind of like a tube of toothpaste. You want to push it from the back and go forward. So that's going to give you nice even pressure. So when you squeeze, all of that pressure is going to the tip and it's not going up at all. So that's going to help give you a nice even line. Okay, so one more tip that I'm going to give you is that when you are actually piping on your cookies, to keep your piping bag at about a 90-degree angle, slightly angled. You do not want to pipe sideways on your cookie like this. It's a lot harder for you to see, and if you can see, my line is getting very crooked and very splotchy. That's another reason for that, is because I have my tip right on the thing and it makes for crummy lines. So if you keep your piping bag up above and keep it about 1/4 of an inch to 1/2 an inch up away from the cookie, drop the icing and just let it fall. Then you get a nice straight line. When you are done with one of your colors, after you've cut the tips of your bags, you want to make sure that you keep the tips moist. If the tips dry up, then it will clog up this tip, and when you go to unclog it, you could make your hole a lot bigger and could cause problems with your cookie decorating in the future. So when you are done piping with this color, then you want to take your wet paper towel and just put the tip in there and keep it stored like that. When you pick up your next color, you want to make sure that you clean the tip really well to make sure that you don't have any excess on the tip before you start piping. Okay, so we're going to start off with
a couple of different ways of piping or icing your cookies. One way is to draw a border around the section that you want to color in and then let it dry and fill it in later. And that kind of helps to control where you put that icing. We do it in sections so that we can fill those different sections in and give it a different delineation. The other option that you can do is to draw out your border and then fill it in immediately. Don't let it dry, just keep going. And so if you squeeze a little harder here, you can see that you get a thicker line of icing out. Then you can take your toothpick, or I like to use my scribe tool, and just move that icing around and fill it in how you want it, position it, shape it. For this bat, we're going to do kind of the same thing. We're going to pipe the border, and then we're going to fill this in with a different color. You can use your toothpick to shape the ears or whatever. Then we're going to do the wings, and for the wings, I think I'm going to go ahead and just fill them in straight away. And unfortunately, my camera cut off while I was doing this bat, so you don't get to see the lines that I put on here. But I did pipe these lines on while it was still wet, and that allows for it to sink down into the icing and have a nice flat surface. So these aren't going to be raised after the fact. And then of course I filled in the center with purple, and I'll show you that a little bit later. So back to this pumpkin, we're going to, now that it's dried a little, we're going to fill in these other sections. And we're just going to go ahead and straight fill them in. And then I'm going to take my green and I'm going to pipe some dots on while it's still wet. This is called a wet on wet technique. And that allows those dots to just sink down into the icing and have a nice flush surface when it dries. They won't be raised, which I'll show you that a little bit later. So back to the spider. Now that the body part is dry, I'm going to do the head so that they can actually be separated. If I did these both while it was wet, they would just blend together and be one big piece. So I add a couple of eyes from the sprinkle kit, position them with the toothpick, put some legs on, sometimes the icing breaks while you're piping, and just go back and fill it in. So you can see I did the purple body and did the green eyes with the wet on wet technique. I just did a couple of green dots and then black dots on top of it. Put a little sprinkle there for the mouth. Pretty cute. Okay, I'm going to use some more sprinkles for this spider, I think. Take some of these little purple spiders that are in here and put those on. So because the body is dry, when I do the dots on here, they are not going to sink into the icing like they did before on the pumpkin. They're going to stay raised, so they're going to be little bumps on its back. But I'm going to use a couple of them to glue these little spiders on and make it look like, you know, spiders carrying around its little babies, and then the other little bumps can be its eggs or something. Okay, now we're going to finish up this pumpkin. We're just going to give it a little stem, and yeah, since we've got the extra sprinkles, might as well utilize them and make this pumpkin a little bit more festive. I'm just going to throw a few sprinkles on there. And then you can take your toothpick and just kind of position them while it's still wet. Put them where you'd like them. Okay, so looking at this pumpkin, this is a good way of showing you the difference between piping your border and letting it dry, and then piping your border and just filling it in immediately. Here's your finished bat. You can see that border around your bat, and that's the border that we filled in immediately. So you can see the two different types of frosting these cookies. So there you go. There's 3 of the mini cookies in the kit, decorated up. Here's the black light effect. It's a little tough to get pictures of. But I hope that you have fun decorating these cookies. Use your imagination. Use some of these techniques that you saw and just do whatever you like to do and make it look awesome.